Water reuse is not a new technique or concept. Knowledge on wastewater treatment and reuse has been accumulated along with the history of humankind. In the upcoming panel discussion, we have invited our panel of experts to discuss the reuse and recycling of water in cities, promoting circular economy. I would like to invite Mr. Somalendra Ghosh, Associate Partner and Global Water Lead, KPMG India, to moderate this discussion. It's my pleasure to invite our co-panelists, Mr. Arun Lakhani, Chairman and Managing Director, Vishwa Raj Group, Mr. Ajit Radhakrishnan, Senior Specialist, World Bank, Dr. Sunita Purushottam, Head of Sustainability, Mahindra Lifespace Developers Limited. Welcome, everyone. Platform is all yours, Mr. Ghosh.
Welcome to our panel today on a very important topic on wastewater reuse and circular economy. We have a very eminent set of panelists, and I will first start with Mr. Radhakrishnan, who is from the WRG 2030. Wastewater reuse is actually gaining prominence and a lot of focus from the countries across the world. The policymakers is actually realizing that wastewater reuse is a key component of fighting water security challenges. And across the world, many organizations are working in this field. WRG 2030 is a pioneer in that field, and it's working in multiple countries. So hence I'll come to Mr. Radhakrishnan first to tell us about some of the experiences of WRG 2030, which he feels can be emulated in other places, and what are the key learnings from there. So over to you, Mr. Radhakrishnan.
Sure. Thanks, Sumo. I think a very pertinent topic to discuss and also find pathways to actually tackle some of those challenges that we face as a community. Now, in the case of wastewater reuse, the experience that 2030 WRG, Water Resource Group of the World Bank, has been gathering has largely been around two important aspects. One is around policy making, which is about creating enabling policies, creating the right capacities at the state government and also the national government level. And secondly, to also work with the private sector, the civil society, and other stakeholders in this whole gamut of technology and policy related questions, and try to find answers that fit both their side of equation, which is about business sustainability and also ensuring environmental and social welfare outcomes for the government. So from our experience, we feel that this is a realization that most of the stakeholders are gathering in terms of the ability of wastewater reuse as a vehicle or as a mechanism to achieve climate outcomes, sustainable development outcomes, and also welfare outcomes when it comes to environmental sustainability. For the governments, this has been an important area to look at. The government of India has been taking very important steps in this direction. We have the Namami Gange initiative. We have many such initiatives now that talk about grey water reuse, which is as an essential component of the program delivery. In addition to that, globally, there are also experiments that are happening around market-based mechanisms, policy incentives, structuring the incentives in the right format and right level for the stakeholders to take action. So the economic instruments that we are looking at doesn't need to be just focused on regulatory aspect. It could also be on market-based mechanism, which is where we feel that a lot of the infrastructure that is created in wastewater reuse has generated the right level of outcomes and the right kind of outcomes targeting the sector that it's targeting. So that's an important learning. And I would just like to conclude by adding one more point to this, which is about looking at the wastewater infrastructure, the treatment infrastructure that we have in different parts of the world. So our experience and our analysis really find that wherever wastewater reuse has been integrated into wastewater treatment infrastructure, they have performed marginally, they have performed significantly better than the wastewater reuse, wastewater treatment infrastructure without a reuse component.
Yeah, so I think it actually works as a self-regulation kind of scenario, because when you have buyers for that wastewater, they themselves actually ensure that the quality of discharges of at least acceptable quality. But you talked about market-based instruments, which is a very interesting thing, because in many other places, we typically what we see is that it's Pollution Control Board trying to enforce the discharge norms, etc., which is a regulation-driven scenario. So if you can cite some examples of market-based instruments, maybe globally, one or two examples, so that will be really great.
Sure. I think market-based mechanisms are taking an important role here in the sense that between regulatory policy mechanisms and also between the laissez-faire kind of approach that we have, at least in certain places, this is an important midway for the businesses and also for the governments to look at, because it offers the right kind of incentives for both the stakeholders, for the government to look at as from a regulatory perspective, and also for the businesses and private sector to look at it from a sustainability perspective. So two important and two often cited examples that I think I could share is one from Peru, which is about the blue water certificates. The National Water Authority of Peru has mandated for the companies in Peru a blue water certification that is about for the companies to have a water footprint, a proper plan to have a water footprint, and how far the compliance is regulated or how far the compliance is measured, and to what extent they are engaging with the communities in terms of creating the demand supply, balancing the demand supply gaps in these catchments. So that's an example where companies are incentivized to perform based on sustainability standards, and more companies are now coming forward. I guess the latest count is somewhere around 35 companies that at the national level to get a blue water certification. So these are incentives that are structured along the performance route, where you have a certain water accounting principle, and the companies are then adhering to those blue water certification standards and then achieve that standards based on their performance. Now, another important aspect that can also be talked about as a very important aspect of market-based mechanism is also around the wastewater reuse certificates that we have championed in India and specifically in Maharashtra. This is about capitalizing on the differential treatment capacities of the different industries that are working in a cluster and creating a market around wastewater trading, which is about the differential trading capacity, the differential treatment capacity of industries are then leveraged to kind of create a market between them, so that some of the companies which fall in the sub-performance or subpar performance level can actually trade and buy certificates from the companies that treat water to a certain quality and volumetric levels. Here, the important aspect is that the government takes a regulatory perspective, and the government would be the agent that creates the level playing field for industries for performance and also for monitoring. And there's also space for integrating technology inside there. So there is the scope for, as we find through hackathons and other technology platforms that we have used by working with the government, we find that there is an opportunity to integrate mechanisms like blockchain regulated or blockchain backed platforms, AI and ML to detect fraud in the system. So there's a lot of opportunities out there when it comes to technology integration in market-based mechanisms. And this is also where it could improve the transparency of the system for the market to kind of regulate and moderate the kind of trade that can actually happen, and the stakeholders can benefit well from this.
Excellent. So that means it's a system where basically you will be setting a kind of target. There must be some target setting for the industries or industrial clusters. And if you overachieve that target, then you can actually convert that overachieved quantity into some kind of credit system. And somebody who is underachieving will be having the option to buy that credit point or credit whatever system that you have conceptualized under that. And instead of paying penalty, they can choose to actually buy those credit points. And there has to be a exchange to trade those credit points, whether it's a certificate form or water coins, whatever form you conceptualize that. So I think that's a wonderful concept. Is it possible also to integrate other types of users? You talked about industries, industrial clusters, but why not cities or say large gated communities also to participate in this trading system? Is it possible?
I think it's quite a dynamic system and quite kind of flexible in that respect, Sumo. So in fact, when we identified the use cases that can actually go into a market-based mechanism, we did identify gated communities and large residential complexes that can actually be because these are systems where we could monitor, regulate, and also identify the users quite well. Unlike confounding variables, and the level of confounding variables will be minimal in such systems. Urban wastewater reuse regimes are perfect examples of where we can actually test this out. But we are also looking at the possibility of extending the application into urban agriculture interfaces. Now, this is again a gray area, because we would need to have protocols and standards for wastewater reuse in agriculture. We would need to work with multiple regulatory agencies and also standards and certifications to have that done. So that's still early days for urban to agri wastewater reuse through a formal mechanism that can actually incentivize reuse. But urban, yes, perfectly, we could find the ideal examples or cases for replication, and businesses and industrial clusters are the best, I would say in management parlance, the lowest hanging fruit out there.
Excellent. I'll just, since we talked about gated communities and the urban settings, I will come to Dr. Purushottam. Our company, Mahindra Space, is doing phenomenal work in creating urban living spaces across the country. And just wanted to know from you, madam, that what are the key initiatives or innovations that your company undertakes in the housing, gated communities and townships that you develop? How you encourage water reuse and optimum use of water?
Thank you so much. Definitely, this is a topic or an area of deep interest plus concern, I would say, and therefore in terms of the urban population and how we can reduce the amount of water usage in the first place and then come to reuse. So there is a strategy, there is a method to the madness, and I believe it is similar to carbon emissions, actually, in the sense that when Prime Minister spoke about the 2070 target, he actually mentioned something that probably people have not paid too much attention, is every customer, every consumer has to be eco-conscious. So therefore, demand reduction is key. And one of the key things he had said, that we have to reduce our intensity of energy use by 45%. And this similar intensity reduction in water needs to happen. 135 liters per person is what is allowed, but is 135 liters necessary? How much does a village person use? How much does an urban resident use? And that disparity is what bothers us. And therefore, there are various mechanisms of doing demand reduction, and one of them is a very simple technology, and they are called as low flow fixtures. Low flow fixtures is a very, very simple aerator that goes and fits in your tap. There are a wide variety of makes that are available, and flow rates. The flow rate is key, and therefore to wash a hand, if the flow rate is high, the rate at which the water flows out is high, you would have actually wasted that water you don't actually need, because it's all gushing out. So you monitor the flow rate, monitor in this through the aerator, restrict. These are flow restrictors and aerators. Aerators, they're called aerators because you are actually mixing air, and you try and get a similar experience of water use, and your experience is not marred, but you experience water, what usage of water you are expecting, but at the same time, the flow has reduced. So the flow restrictors and aerators help you achieve that. And one wonderful thing about this, it's a very simple thing. It can be adopted by each person, and that's one action that every home, every citizen needs to take, is to reduce, refuse reduce. So reduction of flow is the first thing. I don't know whether to call it technology, but there are technological solutions available, high end, and you can just fit these things into the tap, have two types of, so one of them is a eco mist type of so it gives a mist kind of so these are simple things, simple interventions, but it takes a lot of doing. And one of the best things about these flow restrictors, it has a connection with energy. It actually, so if you reduce your water consumption through these flow restrictors by 20%, 20% of your pumping energy cost comes down. There is a direct correlation to water, how much pumping, because ultimately you would have pumped, and we are all in high rises now. You would require that much energy to pump it. Apart from these low flow fixtures, we look at dual plumbing systems. They've been around for quite a long time. I again don't know whether we should call it technology, but dual flow pipe plumbing systems allow you to reuse the water of the sewage treatment plant. What really needs intervention is the type of sewage treatment plants that we have, and to be able to come up with technologies that are lower in terms of maintenance, do not have so much dependency on chemicals for treatment and treating the water, the tertiary treatment of water. Could look at probably eco STPs or solutions that allow us and there needs to be a mechanism to integrate such systems within the gated communities. And those technologies are the ones which we are looking out for and solution providers. The other thing is metering. And the metering technology is that something that gets us very excited, because if you don't have the sensitization around water and no home has individual meters, we actually feel that water is our right and it is not metered, and therefore we can use as much. It is our right to use as much. So unless we have proper metering solutions and are able to communicate to our customers and every individual that this is my water usage vis-a-vis my neighbors, and this is, you're going to be charged as per. So the cost of water and the metering solutions, and those have definitely evolved, and there are solutions with artificial intelligence and that help you gather not just the water usage. It also helps you understand, okay, which of the devices are higher guzzle. So whether your washing machine is consuming more versus your dishwasher versus your other usage that you're doing. So you're able to point out where your water, and it can also identify whether there's a leakage of water that is flowing out. So these have become very, very, we've moved from simple meters to meters that are sonic with AI and net and are available through in the gated community to all. So these are some of the technologies that we are very excited about, that we are looking at implementing and in our gated communities.
Let's now move to Mr. Lakhani, whose Vishwaraj infrastructure has actually implemented a real-life reuse project in Nagpur. And we have now already heard Mr. Radhakrishnan and Dr. Purushottam from various policy perspective and examples of what can be done in building situations. Let's hear about a city-level reuse project, how it was implemented, and the story behind it. So over to you, Mr. Lakhani. Please share your experience of the Nagpur project, where you have implemented a very large reuse project.
The Nagpur reuse project began with a public interest litigation for contamination of a nearby reservoir. You see, the Nagpur sewage used to flow into Gosekhurd and used to contaminate it for years together, leading to a lot of public outcry. And then the High Court ruled that they must build this STP as early as possible. So that initiated this process for the first PPP project, concept of first PPP project on the sewage treatment side. On the water side, it was already there in Nagpur, the distribution side. So the basic structure was that it will be a deferred payment structure, that the investor, the private partner will invest all the 100% funds, and then he will be paid in 15 years annuity. But if he is able to sell the water to nearby industry, and we have thermal power stations nearby, then there is a sharing ratio that was pre-decided in the bid itself, that it will be put to use. Here I would like to go a step backwards, and you see, in Maharashtra, reuse of sewage is not the first time that it has happened with us. We were the first PPP player to do it. But before that, Mahagenco, the generation company of Maharashtra, has on its own set up a STP by taking the sewage from Nagpur Municipal Corporation and treating and reusing it themselves.
Okay.
So they had all the data of how much it costs and what is and it is for the same plants. They were using 110 MLD water, and they needed another 190 MLD more to completely replace the fresh water. So it went. So they were like in the know of how it works and what are the costs and what benefits it brings. So with this set formula, we invested into this project, and it began in last 3 years back, and we are supplying water for the last 1.5 years to these power stations. And the best part of it is that this 190 MLD reservation from the same water source from where the Nagpur Municipal Corporation draws water as well as the Genco draws water will be transferred to Nagpur Municipal Corporation. So the city will have enough water for the next 35 years population growth. So that type of security one single reuse project can bring to a city.
Great. And what was the technology used over there? It was a tertiary plant, or?
Yeah, it is an SBR technology for secondary treatment, and then fiber disc filters for the tertiary treatment. Because here the basic water quality is good. It is coming from a lake, so the TDS and the TSS are quite reasonable. So is the quality of sewage. So these two give them exactly what quality they have asked for of the fresh water that they use generally in their cooling powers, usages.
And how did the economics of it work? Means in terms of maybe fresh water, they must be paying, industry must be already paying something vis-a-vis the cost of this wastewater. So any ballpark figures of the overall cost of this treatment and vis-a-vis the freshwater cost, and how did it work out for the industries also?
This is a national issue, honestly speaking, because in Maharashtra, although the Maharashtra government almost 7-8 years back brought out this regulation that industry in 5 years must look for their own sources of water and wherever use is possible. Otherwise, they will be, the water reservation will go to drinking as well as agriculture will have precedence over the industry. So anyway, that's why Mahagenco did it on their own, investing their own money. So here in Maharashtra, that was a set rate. But nationally, if you see the policy price of water and the actual cost of treated water, there is a delta, there is a differential. Yeah. Because policy price can be 5 rupees, 6 rupees per KL, it depends on from state to state. Whereas a treatment is a fixed cost, you cannot change it. So you will need whatever it needs to treat a particular type of sewage, whether it is a high TDS sewage or normal sewage, and transport it to a distance. It may be 20 kilometers, maybe 50 kilometers. So all that pumping cost and the capex involved in. So these parameters will definitely bring a number which is much higher than the policy price. So in this context, unless government intervenes here, because you see CERC and MERC, all the regulators supported this move in a big way. They said this is a very correct move. So, this cost should be absorbed by the consumer. So they allowed it as a pass-through. Right?
Okay.
Going to a further step, they made this as a fixed cost so that their MOD, the merit order dispatch, does not get affected. Otherwise, that is also a big challenge for any power station. The most critical thing is MOD. In this situation, but you see, power ministry's thinking can be that they want to deliver the power at lowest possible cost. So this is a paisa or 2 paisa or 3 paisa, depending on the type of it's subjective. Additional cost to the consumer. Many times the power ministry, although it came up with a regulation that within 50 kilometers the power station should opt for the use of water. But then this difficulty from their point of view, prevented this policy to really take off the way it should have been. So, in my opinion, if there is an intervention that is required.
It's very important that these kind of technologies are not restricted to eminent builders and real estate operators. It has to be actually all pervasive, and then only the macro level impact will be there.
True.
Now, and in that, government actually can play a major role. For example, we have seen the LED example. So through a proper subsidy mechanism, if it is incentivized, then I think it will become more popular. So what, in your thought, should be, I think, the state and central government's role in making this kind of devices and instruments popular?
So just as we need energy to be metered, water needs to be metered, and that too not at a full level. It has to be at the level of the home and the individual. So that is the kind of a mandate that we would need. Incentives, definitely, these are expensive, and moreover, they have a capex and a opex cost associated. Because moment I say it is it is on a network and you're able to see it on your phone, definitely we are looking at technology. So it will have a continuous monthly charge that we are incurring. Of course, those charges are not too much, but definitely some sort of incentivization around, and a large scale, the scalability that you just spoke about is important. Currently, there are very few players. There are maybe 5 to 6 players that you can actually count on fingers, coming up with good quality meters which will run over a lifetime, right? And so that that needs scale, and for that definitely we would want to see a transformation, just as EESL caused the transformation of LED. A similar program needs to happen where procurement of these meters happen at such a large scale that the market rationalizes the cost of these meters and deployment of the same. So EESL was market transformational for light and the Ujala scheme. We need a similar market transformation with respect to water meters. There are some more technologies I can talk about, but that's more about the construction phase.
Yeah, you can carry on. Actually, we can hear a few more.
Yeah. So one of the things I don't know whether to call it a technology or not, because these are, in our mind, in our view, it is like something that should be done by everybody, right? So one of the things that we have actively integrated is curing compounds. Curing compounds is a technological innovation from construction perspective. So when you're doing tiling or when you're doing your finishes, you actually don't end up using concrete. You actually use curing compounds, and it is quicker, faster, more structurally, it is better, and you are able to finish the work quickly without use of water. So these curing compounds are something that has helped us drastically reduce the water consumption during the, even during the actual building. We have also moved to MyOne construction technologies. That also has helped us reduce. So we are not building by brick anymore, or block by block anymore with concrete in between. So these are faster setting, quicker setting, lesser water intensive technologies that we have adopted that helps us not only scale the production but also reduce the water consumption. So these are some of the things that are helping us during the construction phase. The other thing that we do need water for is air pollution, dust mitigation and control. Again, exploring whether we can use recycled water. We do find it difficult to get recycled water, and to the earlier speaker, Mr. Radhakrishnan, mentioned that if we were to get water which is recycled for variety of purposes, for construction purposes, and also for landscape, right? These are some of the things that can help us use water which is recycled, not fresh water.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things that are still open-ended, but we would like to explore. Some sites we are able to get it. For example, in Gurgaon, Huda gives us recycled water, so we use that for air pollution, dust mitigation control, but not all sites we are able to get. So there is also a barrier to getting recycled water. So many of the, so even if you have a STP which is operating and you are actually generating the wastewater, there are vendors who will not pick up the wastewater because they are tankers for drinking water. So,
Yeah.
so there are few barriers, but I am sure that if there is a mechanism where we are able to trade water and make recycled water available, that would be really, really useful for development, construction purposes.
There is a demand for recycled water in some parts of the industry, some parts of the commercial sector, and it's up to also the urban sector, the STPs and the urban managers, basically the municipal corporations and water utilities, also to make suitable arrangements so that the wastewater is supplied. And in that context, maybe instead of very large STPs, of course, it's a matter of debate, and it also depends on the topography and the overall structure of a city. But maybe decentralized STPs at a smaller scale, at local level, if you can utilize the wastewater, that becomes more economical and easier to use. So that could be one solution, and many actually actually proposes that this kind of solution should be more encouraged rather than very large STPs, because then that entire treated wastewater, there's a large pumping cost to again take it back to the user points. So instead of doing that, maybe decentralized solutions could be more effective. So coming back to Mr. Radhakrishnan, so you talked about the wastewater use certificate system being tried out in India, and we are talking of industries, industrial clusters to adopt it. Now, if we look at cities and industrial clusters and we want to implement this system, definitely we cannot implement it because it's a new concept. We cannot implement it in one shot. So we have to prioritize. In order to prioritize, what could be the approach? How do you take up or pick up an industry and go ahead with that? What are the key steps in implementation of this innovative concept? Because it sounds very interesting, and it actually can lead to a lot of wastewater use and use of wastewater by industries. But how to target, how to prioritize? Because here you will require investments, you will require creation of regulator, a kind of a trading system. You cannot do it for the entire country together. It has to be phase by phase. So what would be the process to implement it?
$1 million question, Sumo. I think what has been our experience has been that at least in the case of state governments, so for example, the case of Karnataka, the government of Karnataka has gone ahead, identified a short list of cities and prioritized cities for wastewater investments in infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure. Now, this is after taking a multiple set of parameters, using several criteria for filtering, and then identifying which cities are near or co-located with industrial clusters or business units that are bulk water users. So one of the primary criteria that we could think of could be bulk water users, who could come from either from the urban perspective, just as Dr. Purushottam mentioned. It could also be a real estate cluster near an urban agglomeration which has generated wastewater. So it could be one of those filters. The second could be largely around the nature of wastewater generated and the kind of demand that comes from industrial clusters. So not all wastewater that you generate or the level of quality that you have kind of treated to would be required by industry. So mostly industries would require something that you would probably fix it at the level of a secondary treatment. So you wouldn't need a tertiary treated water or quality of water to be pumped into an industrial cluster, because the different demands that you have from the industrial cluster might actually be different. Again, the type of infrastructure that you have in urban location. So earlier we had this discussion around whether we can have low carbon intensive treatment infrastructure. So in that case, you could even think about artificial wetlands or constructed wetlands, which can further generate or further reduce the carbon footprint of treatment infrastructure. So in these cases, the nature and the demand of the wastewater that is generated is becoming another criteria. So based on that, a state or a city authority or a local administration can identify the set of criteria with stakeholder consultations and identify that criteria, and then ascribe what cities or townships are eligible for wastewater treatment infrastructure, and investment prioritization can happen in that regard. Now, as we speak, there are also initiatives that are happening in India to prioritize cities based on the wastewater infrastructure, and also the co-location of industries and urban clusters, including real estate sector that demands wastewater. So we have smart cities that are part of the program that are now also looking at the possibility of wastewater infrastructure. So you have co-location of textile industries for that matter. In the case of Surat, in the case of Indore, and you also have textile clusters in other areas that are driving economic growth. So it becomes the priority of the state government and also the various other levels of local government to understand what are the drivers that they're looking at to set those filters. And I would say that that's a heavily or a principally local phenomenon that the government needs to address, because the priorities can change even within geographies, right? You have a number of states where they can take different filters and criteria to apply that and then go ahead with prioritizing locations. It can be tier 1 cities, it can be small towns, it can also be the kind of large industrial estates or export zones that we are talking about that can actually be lined up for investment on wastewater infrastructure. So I wouldn't say there's a straight-jacketed solution for wastewater filtering of criteria for wastewater infrastructure investments, but I would say that this is something that is highly local and can be taken in consultation with the stakeholders that vary from city to city and from town to town.
Yeah, but I think government can also play a major role in incentivizing cities and states to go for reuse of water. Maybe set some kind of reuse target, or if not setting target, but measure the extent of reuse by different cities, and then maybe through reward program, incentive program, maybe with some fund allocated for rewarding top 10 cities. We have seen in Swachh Bharat, this the cleanest city competition has energized many cities to actually wholeheartedly go for cleaning the cities. So that kind of competition, what we always hear, it is competitive federalism. So taking that spirit, maybe wastewater use also should be targeted as one area to channelize investments.
I agree. I can't agree more. So I think this is a perfect example of how positive incentive structures can actually bring transformation. And this is what we had discussed some time ago, that the aspect around blue water certificates for industries is driving innovation and driving adoption, because more and more industries are complying because of the reason that there is peer pressure. And also that there is an incentive that the government gives along with the blue water certificates in terms of promotion of such industries and clusters, and also providing them additional infrastructure that is required. So from the government side, I think being a regulator and also being the guardian of the society from that egalitarian perspective, I think it's appropriate. It's an appropriate role for the government to take. Now, if you were to think about a parallel, I would say that the inclusion of green cover as kind of an incentive in the 15th Finance Commission reports for encouraging states to adopt greening and environmental activities is something that we can look at as a role model, and also a template for bringing about positive change in the case of wastewater reuse. Now, can cities be incentivized, or can state governments be incentivized if they promote policies that promote wastewater reuse? That's a question that the governments can answer. I think it can be done, because right now we do have metrics, we do have several ranking systems within Niti Aayog, and also done by industry associations like FICCI that reward industries and clusters based on the progressive measures that they take in wastewater reuse. So I think it's just a matter of time in terms of wastewater appropriate incentives being mainstreamed into various policy frameworks and also guidelines at national level. And that can drive a lot of change at the subnational level when it comes to states, cities, and townships.
In fact, what comes to our mind that Nagpur has done this twice, this reuse projects, once on PPP, once on EPC mode, normal mode. In Surat, we have heard municipal commissioner in an earlier session. If you recall, we both were there. Yeah. And he's so happy about his experience of reuse projects that he is planning to make the entire city zero liquid discharge, or virtually close to zero liquid discharge within next few years. Whereas there is still a lot of resistance from different other cities. And when you talk to other cities, they talk about a lot of issues, including power tariff going up if you give it to the power plants. So different varied reasons of resistance is given. But ideally, these projects will actually make an impact when it is adopted across the country by various cities, various state governments. So what do you think should be the approach, should it be the initiative of Government of India on one hand and the state governments? And what kind of maybe institutional framework is required so that this kind of reuse project becomes universal? It's not only one Nagpur or one Surat, which is discussed, but it should be like universal common phenomena in India.
I think that we need a national mission for reuse, like we have Namami Gange program. This national mission for reuse can be under NMCG as well, because that institution already exists, so no need to create a new institution. However, you see, if you look at it, what I feel is that we should offer the treated water at 10% less than the cost of fresh water available to them. Now, availability of fresh water to industry, forget only power stations, across industry varies from state to state in a big way. It can be 3 or 4 rupees in Haryana to 40 rupees in Maharashtra or 50 rupees in Maharashtra. So to bridge this particular gap, if we make treated water more attractive, then the private industry will also look at it with more eagerness, and of course all the green points that they are going to earn because of that will be the additional benefit to them. If this mission takes up this cost, even if we start with only power station across India, we can save 6,000 million liter per day of fresh water by replacing it with the treated water. This is a very conservative figure. Here only those cities where you have a power station and large cities around it, so it's mapped across India, this data. So otherwise it can go to much higher number, but we are talking about that 50-kilometer radius and minimum in a very conservative way. That means 12 crore people can have drinking water. So and if you see the cost involved, is like around 6,000 crore per annum is the government has to pitch in for that differential between the treated water cost, actual cost, and the selling cost, which is less than the freshwater cost. I think it's a very good bargain if you look at the environment, the SDG 6 norms that we have to fulfill, the health, like 21% diseases are still waterborne, and particularly for sewage, because drinking water, if anything goes wrong, or there is a some mishap, it's a political issue, it's a social issue, so it gets attention immediate. Whereas sewage for years together is flowing into our rivers and lakes, and unless someone puts a PIL, no one bothers about it. So I think here government, if they at the highest level, if they think holistically, and who, instead of saying whether UD should put in money or the power company should pay the money or the electric consumer should pay that burden, if government pitches it in from the common kitty and provides the basic security. Why NMCG is getting response? Because there is a security, revenue security guaranteed by central government, and not the urban local body, which except few does not have the wherewithal that the banks or the lenders will ask for any private player. So if we frame a larger policy, which puts it as a national mission, and it is worthy of national mission, because this 6,000 MLD will go to 60,000 MLD once we frame and prepare a proper document which is balanced, where international investors can come, international banks will be comfortable to fund them apart from the Indian banks. Then it will really fly.
Absolutely. In fact, this brings to another thought that when you launch something like a national mission for reuse, and we also know that there is a national reuse policy that is being framed right now, and it will be launched maybe this year or next year, but some eminent policymakers working on that under the aegis of, I think, National Mission for Clean Ganga only. So those things are coming into, I think, falling in place gradually. Do you also think there should be some kind of institutional structure for supporting this kind of reuse project? Especially, we have seen in some countries, there are off-takers who provide guaranteed offtake to all the STPs. So what happens is that when you're constructing an STP on PPP mode, the concessionaire also knows that his secondary treated water, the normal STP outlet, that discharge will not be thrown to any environmental body, but it will actually be bought by some agency, which is a government agency. And that agency then becomes responsible for discharging, measuring the quality. So it also ensures that the reuse also ensures that discharge quality is also good. So it's like a self-regulating mechanism for STPs as well. And thirdly, it also creates a revenue flow, cash flow for all STPs. So STPs will also become more viable in future. And once an agency is created for taking wastewater, buying out wastewater from the STPs, then it can actually be more focused. It will find out buyers. It will actually create a market. So the market making can be done, because it will be a dedicated agency to address wastewater, the treated wastewater. Its raw material is treated wastewater. So it has to find out economic use for it and ensure there is a market for it. So do you think this kind of mechanism or institutional structure will work at least in some states where there is already a demand for treated wastewater, like say Maharashtra or say Tamil Nadu, where cost of water is quite high?
I have mixed thoughts on this, yes and no. On one hand, as long as we guarantee the revenue, we provide the revenue security to the private players, the entrepreneurs, they will be more effective in finding the users and selling water than any government. Because government has their limitations on the budgets and on their deployment of budgets. Whereas a private industry, if once the final rates are decided for that city, at what cost it will be delivered, at what distance it will be delivered, then the investments can keep on flowing as and when required, instead of setting up something and then waiting for the customers to come.
Yeah.
The other model which was tried in Maharashtra, which didn't fly, was that you invest and you have your revenue coming from that sale of water, which is also not possible because no lender will fund such projects. There has to be a minimum take or pay guarantee from the government in this.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, states where they want to utilize the treated water also for agriculture, not only just for industry, because there are many places where you can treat, but there is no industry to take it. But if you use it for agriculture, then you are still saving fresh water, which can be utilized in industry. So, and the cross subsidization will be possible because they need not give the full charges to agriculture users, but can like we do in the drinking water in the city, that a commercial will pay 100 rupees and a domestic will pay 5 rupees. Cross subsidy.
Yeah.
So that their total cost, like what you said, that they offtake it at a fixed price from the producer, secondary treated or tertiary treated, whatever is required. And then cross subsidize and distribute it across the state then probably yes, that is definitely an advantage if government steps in there, and it is less risky for the private player any which
Yeah.
way.
Absolutely.
But then his age in marketing, I believe the PPP means it should have that addition of efficiency and the flair for business added from the private player,
Absolutely.
because that's the value he brings in.
Yeah. No, sure. And I think in that sense, Nagpur model is something which has really worked well and can be emulated by other cities also. And in fact, coming to Dr. Purushottam, this kind of incentive, even the cities can also think of for the individual gated communities. So any community which is achieving maybe over and above X percentage of reuse, they may be rewarded through some incentive mechanism, maybe some relaxation on property tax or whatever could be the incentives.
So there are incentives like that, but specifically for wastewater reuse, no. And when you look at a water balance, okay, so basically the amount of water that you are using, then the amount of wastewater that you are generating. So there's consumption of water, then there is wastewater generation, which you treat, right? Now, once you treat it, there is surplus water available, which you can use in two purposes. One is for landscaping, and so I'm just specifically talking about a building and a building scenario.
Correct.
So you can use it for landscaping and you can use it for flushing purpose. You can also treat it further and use it for drinking purpose. And some gated communities are looking at it, but there is less acceptance of that. So what happens is we are left with surplus water. So this surplus water, many housing societies let go in stormwater drains. So you don't have a zero discharge housing society. So one of the ways of plugging it in is, what do you do with that surplus water? Who takes it? How does municipality use it? Could there be some mechanism? So instead of putting it into stormwater drains, could there be a mechanism to see that we have the kind of infrastructure, if possible, to be able to pass it on to somebody who needs that water, right? So that is exactly the earlier point, that construction, we need the water. We housing societies are producing surplus water, which they are not drinking. So because we are not closing the loop, it is, you can't, many housing societies will not stick to the concept of, reusing the water that. So we have excess water. So it is not that water is not there. It is going down and it is not being let go without being utilized. And we can't put it in rainwater harvesting system that could lead to contamination of aquifers. And that is something that should not be done, right? But then how do you take this water and utilize it in the way you should be? So what kind of mechanisms that municipalities need to set in to put in place that encourages the reuse, and there is a mechanism to reuse it. So if you see all the calculations in the ministry, of building permissions, you will see that there is STP installed everywhere. So there is water being produced, but is that water being consumed? No, that water is not getting consumed. So you have a surplus over there. So there is a lot of wastewater if the STP is working. And therefore, to the earlier point you made, should we look at STP resizing? Should we look at reducing water demand in the first place, right? And so one needs to look at the water balance. One needs to see that, okay, what kind of STPs do we need? Can we reduce the sizing of the STP? And that's the first and foremost thing that, so if I am doing low flow restrictors, should the Ministry of Environment look at resizing of STP? And that somehow is a miss, right? So we need to look at how resizing of STPs are allowed, and we do not have to stick to certain criteria. If we are using low flow fixture, we can say 20% reduction in demand, and therefore my size of the STP should be less. Okay, and what do I do with the surplus water, which is not, it's not, if you see the water balance, it doesn't work out. Okay, so we are left with surplus water. What do we do with that? And how do we utilize it? So there are questions rather than solutions here.
No, Absolutely. In fact, the parallel that comes to my mind is regarding, say, rooftop solar. Now, if you have large roof space, you can have solar panels. You use it for your common space. Only if you can, if you have the provision to sell it back, sell the surplus energy to the grid at certain guaranteed price, then only this kind of initiative be encouraged or become popular. Many municipalities went for waste to energy. Only after government gave a guarantee that, okay, if you have surplus energy, you can sell it back to the grid at certain guaranteed price. That creates an incentive for creating that kind of infrastructure and putting in that kind of investments. So I think you're very right. We have to also think of the surplus water that is coming out because you are treating the entire wastewater in-house. So, but absolutely right, and I think dual piping is one of the solutions. If you can use it for your entire flushing, cleaning, car washing needs, many housing complexes that we have seen uses treated water for washing the cars and all other common amenities. So I think this is the only way one can go. Coming back to Mr. Radhakrishnan for my, I would say my last questions in this panel to you. What do you think is the overall time frame for some of these market-based instruments to become visible to people? At least in some sectors, in some clusters, you start seeing these new instruments getting implemented, especially in India. What is your estimation or approximation that when you think that maybe some clusters like that you mentioned textile, it could be leather, typically the water guzzling industry. So where do you think it will start getting implemented and how soon?
I think this is a tough question to answer, Sumo. So basically, this would be dependent on the kind of data that we have with the different clusters. And again, since it's innovative, we need to be sure that innovations don't fail, at least by virtue of the kind of the paucity of data or systems that we have. So we need to make sure that this succeeds in a place where there is robust systems. And that, for that matter, this is why we've been looking at industries, because at least in the case of industries where water is an essential part of the business processes, there would certainly be mechanisms that would map wastewater reuse or water use and also the wastewater generated and treated. Now, so for that matter, we are currently in a partnership with the German government, GIZ, working with the industrial clusters, the textile clusters in India in 4 states, and trying to address the issue of wastewater reuse capacities at the industrial cluster level, and also talking to large industries that are essentially using wastewater for their business processes. Now, here again, there's a dichotomy because some of the policy, state-specific policies and also some of the preferences at the subnational level push the industries towards zero liquid discharge. Yeah. There is also a commitment towards zero liquid discharge in certain clusters by virtue of the Supreme Court or the Supreme Court orders and other restrictions that are enforced. So we need to be compliant with the rules of and laws of the land. We need to be sure that the industries benefit, and we need to be sure that the innovations don't fail because there are no data systems to support that. So this is a cautious call, and it kind of we approaching that with all the necessary caveats and precautions. But at the same time, we have very encouraging responses coming from the industries, and we are also in talks with some of the municipalities and urban locations that have got use cases that they think are amenable to deploying innovative solutions. So I would not want to risk giving you a solution or a definite timeline, but I think anywhere between 12 to 24 months is a doable timeline for us in terms of deploying the solution and seeing the use cases, because we have open source solutions when it comes to technology, like blockchain-backed certificate generation mechanisms, AI and ML machine learning used for detecting fraud and pilferage. All that's open source, that's available. But what we need to have is the test case validated. We need to make sure that all the users that are part of the system get benefited. It's not that some of them get disproportionately benefited and some of them don't. We want to ensure equity. We want to make sure that there's a level playing field. Else we have a lot of MSMEs in this country. So we want to be fair to the MSMEs, just as we are fair to the employment generating and the large industries in this country. So in all fairness, we would want this to succeed. And the government also does think that this is a solution that going forward that urban locations and industries can test out. So we are hopeful, and we would want your support in terms of the expert thoughts and also the opinions that some of them were shared here.
Yeah.
I think very relevant, and we would like to factor that in as soon as we get into the mode of implementation. Thanks.
Now, we have heard from Mr. Radhakrishnan earlier that this market-based mechanism that WRG is coming up with, which is the wastewater reuse certificate trading system, where a group of industries coming together, and there will be some amount of regulation. It can be voluntary as well as regulated also. And the regulated agency will then set a kind of target for those industrial clusters for reuse. And if you achieve that target, it's fine. If you overachieve, then the additional overachieved quantity can be converted into a certificate. So you get certificates for your overachieved reuse. And if those who do not achieve the target, either they pay penalty or they can actually buy credits to offset their shortfall. So that it's basically very similar to carbon trading.
Right.
Yeah, so this is one concept that has come up. The other point which Dr. Purushottam was talking about is that in the housing complexes, there are a lot of large housing complexes where people are willing to take initiatives to use the wastewater, especially the grey water. But once you use this grey water, and also many of the housing complexes has got these in-house STPs. That water also, once you use for gardening, maybe car washing, and some firefighting and some common usage, then there is a lot of surplus water. And at the housing complex level also, this surplus water flows basically to the stormwater drain. Now, again, if there is a mechanism to allow the housing complexes to sell that water to a common grid, which is basically a grid for reuse water, then that may encourage even individual gated communities or large complexes or large private cities to also adopt reuse in a large scale. So what is your thought on both these ideas, one which came from Mr. Radhakrishnan and the other one from Dr. Purushottam?
On the first point, of course, like you said, it was with the carbon credits. If any support that comes for promoting reuse by way of certificates or by way of credits is most welcome, because that will encourage the industry, and if it is recognized and traded ultimately, that is what ultimately is the carbon certificates aim. That will also help reduce the load on the cost of the treated water. If these instruments become more and more tradable.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good idea to have. On the second part, yes, I would like here to mention in Nagpur we also have 12 smaller distributed STPs. 5 MLD, 10 MLD. 1 MLD. So from there, what we have started to give red tankers. Why red color? Because, and we write it on the bold that this is not for drinking purposes, which is used for gardening, for street, these flower beds, everything. So it is again, because you see all the gardening, construction, and these roadside water beds, everything put together can use hardly 1% of the total water that a city produces, any city for that matter. So the more help of that is to bring awareness about that we must reuse, we must conserve water, than the actual volumetric impact. Like he's rightly said that all these gated communities will have surplus water.
Correct.
So it is good if we can buy it. And like I said, if this national mission is set up, then they can, because there is a cost. Government will have to, take that water and use it somewhere. Probably the gated community will fulfill the requirement of gardens, public gardens in the city. And, possibly. And it's a good idea that then the citizens are, producing the treated water for their own public amenities.
Yeah.
But you need a strong government mechanism at the urban local body level, or some directives from government how to go about it.
Yeah, and I think sensitization is also extremely important to make this kind of systems work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because double pipe systems in the new colonies is becoming mandated. So that is also a very good thing that is happening, that have your own STP use the double line for all the non-potable purposes.
Yeah, and in that context, another very important point that Dr. Purushottam, Sunita Purushottam mentioned is that when you have this double piping and the urban housing systems or gated communities actually start recycling significant part of their water for flushing, cleaning, etc., then your requirement of water per capita also comes down. So these also should be embedded in your urban planning concept. Means currently you are continuing to expand your water supply capacity, considering 135 or 150 LPCD, depending on what kind of city you are in. And then this huge amount of water is finally, post usage, becoming sewage, whether gray water or black water. And then you are thinking of reusing, etc. So if you are really planning serious investments in reuse, you should also plan your water supply infrastructure creation in that fashion. It should be in sync with that.
Sir, this is taking us to a larger issue, which is non-revenue water.
Yeah.
You see, in every city today, out of these 100 smart cities, 82 cities have more than adequate water of 135 LPCD supplied to the city. When you calculate, city-wise, if you see the data, and still we have so much scarcity because we have 40, 50, 60% NRW. Now, unless we address first, and invest in a very big way into these, like what we did in Nagpur 24/7, that you have to replace all the meters, you have to replace all the leaking pipelines. Then and only then we can curtail the supply. Today, even though apparently on the mathematics, we are seeing that, okay, 30 lakh population and you are giving 700 MLD. But if you see from the citizen point of view, he probably is getting the same 135, 100, maybe 150 or somewhere more water. So this is a surplus city, but in a scarcity situation city, if we lose 50% of water pumping in, which is very valuable there, to the leakages, and because of our infrastructure is very old, then we need a very large investment there, and time as well. It takes time, and a lot of social buying in from the as we call it 4P, the fourth P of people, they're buying into. But unless we do that, curtailing water can be counterproductive socially.
Correct. So I think NRW, the leak reduction, which we have also discussed earlier in the sustainable cities, water supply for cities discussion, we had discussion with the DJB, we had discussion with BMC, Additional Commissioner. So I think this is very important point. NRW reduction is a critical component, but also there are cities which are planning very large-scale desalination plants, and desalination costs may be ranging from maybe 70, 80 rupees per kiloliter to 100 rupees per kiloliter in some places, depending on the various technical parameters. And that cost of water, you are willing to create a system, invest in something which is going to produce water at maybe 70 rupees per kiloliter, without exhausting your option of reuse. So I think anywhere any city which is in India at least, which is planning for desalination, should seriously explore all avenues for reuse of wastewater and then go for this costlier options.
You are absolutely right, because at 15, 20, 25 rupees, depending on the sewage, reuse replaceable water for non-potable use is much more, it makes much more sense economically than the desal. However, with the power, solar power costs coming drastically, I think the desal costs may now range around 50 rupees, 60 rupees at the most.
Yeah.
And if it comes to say 40 rupees, then 40 to 50 rupees, because solar, the power costs are coming down.
Correct.
in a
Correct.
big way. Then it makes sense for the coastal city to do desal and conserve the groundwater as it is, instead of, like in say Bombay, we are taking from Tansa to Mumbai. So Mumbai can have its own desal, and Tansa can be used for agriculture or more inland supply of water wherever possible. This is very subjective, very geographically, wherever it is possible. But I believe the desal will become an option with power cost, only with power cost, at least in India.
Yeah, so solar, I think solar is critical for success of desal in India.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, correct. And Dr. Purushottam, I think we also can hope that in some point in time in future, the gated communities and the planned urban localities and cities and communities that your organization is creating, they will also definitely participate in this kind of initiative, and they will compete with each other in preserving water, reusing water, and ensuring that that water balance you talked about is favorable and not leading to wastage.
Absolutely. If I may add, I mean, we also do industrial integrated cities and industrial clusters. Would definitely like to get exchange ideas and thoughts with you yourself and Radhakrishnan ji, to see how whether that can be piloted in one of our cities, the concept that is just being discussed.
The other point which in earlier discussions also we had, and I think it has got an implication here also, is that there is a debate on this large STPs versus the decentralized STP concept. And a great set of people believe that for reuse to be become more pervasive, the decentralized STP concept will work better, because you actually have a large pipe network, you bring entire water, the sewage water, to a large STP. And then from there again to various reuse points, you have to carry it. So the transportation cost becomes significant. Instead of that, and I think Delhi also tried that with some small STPs in the past, where you create small STPs in local boroughs or zones, get all the sewage, treat it, and then use it for the local level gardening and other usage. That may actually work out better, because the costing would be different. So what is your thought on that?
Sir, I am doing both. I'm operating 13 distributed STPs as well as large STPs like 200 MLD. The point is, for gardening and construction purposes or other reuses, it is still 1 or 2% of the total volume of sewage that is produced. For them, definitely it is useful to have small distributed STP, but they will be like half MLD, 400K, 1 MLD, 2 MLD, not more than that. If you are supplying it to industry for reuse, the major portion will come from industry or agriculture if government intervenes. So there, ultimately, you will have to pump the water to a particular source, whether it's a thermal power station or an industrial area, and then distribute it there. So whether you, then it will be more costly if you have to, pump it from 10 points to one industrial area.
Absolutely.
Instead of having this gravity sewerage that brings the sewage to anyway, or in most of the cities, open nalas, bring it to a particular point without any power consumption, without any cost, and then you treat it there and then send one pipeline to that industrial area, or 2 or 3 pipeline at the most. I think for reuse in the industry, we have no option but to go for the larger plants. But yes, the domestic use, the individual gardens, the constructions, we must have smaller distributed STPs for that particular area.
Absolutely. So that means basically what you're saying is that for cities' own reuse, within the city reuse, the distributed system will work, whereas reuse of domestic sewage by industries will necessarily require larger STPs. So these two systems are actually complementary and they
Correct.
should support each other.
Correct.
And that will only work.
Correct.
So many thanks, Mr. Lakhani, for your views. And I think today in the discussions with all three panelists, we have got a complete overview of this issue. We have heard about market-based mechanism, different country examples of how different systems are working elsewhere. We have talked at length regarding in-building solutions and how a community, gated community or housing complex can take innovative steps to reduce their overall net water balance. And we have also heard about cities examples and how combination of distributed STPs, reuse at local level, plus use of cities sewage by industries can combine together to create a large impact. So thank you, Mr. Lakhani, for your views. And also I thank all my other panelists and for joining this session with ET Infra, and thank ET Infra for holding this session, which is extremely relevant and pertinent for our country's water security. So thank you all.
Thanks, Mr. Ghosh, and thanks, ET Infra. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for sharing your detailed inputs on reuse and recycling of water in cities. Now we'll take a short networking break. Stay tuned.